I got a bunch of this UPO, which is a paper with a very thin coat of plastic on both sides. Therefore, will not work with water-based paint, which this is, acrylic. And I started just putting plain piece of paper out. I did mask off the edge with some great tape called frog tape that you can get from the paint stores. It's yellow, it's better than green, but it's very precise when you pull it on. So I said, well, even if I make a total mess, it'll look neat because I'll pull the tape out. And I started painting thinking, I have nothing to lose here. I'm just going to paint and see what happens. And I thought I'll probably just make a mess. But the thing was, at that point, I said, I'm not going to care about the subject. I'm not going to start with any idea, and let's see what happens. And what happened was, I started really just playing like a kid. And I started having fun. And I kind of liked the results. The results were in the same vein I've been painting in, but different. And you can see here, things are quite different. Suzette McAvoy said about my work a few years ago, I'm in a free fall. And I don't know if I like that comment or not, but it was sort of saying, I don't know what I'm going to be doing next. And that's true of this. But the consistent thing was that I started out, and this is my message to artists here today, even though some of you are very, very disciplined and do things totally different from me. I have to tell you that it's so liberating to be like a kid with a piece of paper and not feel like you know anything or care what's going to happen, and just start painting and just explore what happens with the colors. And drag one color over another. I paint with putty knives, brushes, sticks, whatever I feel like. And I've got a big roll of paper towels. Since it's water-based, I can wipe stuff off again. And I like that back and forth, positive and negative back and forth. And I also don't care, I don't find anything sacred while I'm working. So not subject matter, not some area that looks great, and I say, boy, isn't that cool, I better leave that, which I would have done in the past. Now, I'll paint over it, I don't care. But the one thing I adhere to is the maestro's advice, and that is, go for the good painting. And so, if I've got something that's a great area, but doesn't work, I'll paint over it. And I just keep working, and I haven't been thinking about galleries, I haven't been thinking about framing, thinking about sales, anything. I've just, not even whether the stuff is good, I've just painted it and put it aside. And I may go back the next day, I may go back 2 weeks later and say, oh, that's no good, I can't, I'm going to paint over this whole thing. And I'll tell you a few here today where that happened. But the thing is so much fun, so liberating, because I'm willing to fail, and yet I can't fail because I have no expectations. I have no expectations, so my ego doesn't get in the way. And what happens is, surprise, the fun part. Stuff happens that I didn't expect and I couldn't have dreamed up, and if I did, it would have been a triumph. And so the result is what you see here. This is like 3 dozen or so that Janet picked out. And out of a batch of 200 paintings done in about 14 months. I've been very productive. And I've got 200 now again, because these are down here and I've got other ones, but there are a lot more back in the studio. But she picked these out with my agreement, and because we thought they looked good together. And I have to say, because of the way she and her associate, Anne, decided to hang this, and how Lynn did such a great job on the framing, I think the thing looks great. I'm really happy with it. We're not done. I just want to talk about a few pieces, and then, because they might be insightful in a way. First of all, there's one that I call Blue Figure. I'm just not sure where it is.
Right there.
Oh, that one on the door. And you're not going to be able to see all this, so maybe I should try to find it in here. But that one, I think, is a pretty good representation of the kind of thing where I'm transitioning a little bit from the Kooning-esque, big, broad brush strokes, where the strokes, the brush marks are as important as anything in it. And, that thing I paint, things turning them over and over and over, so sometimes it's a landscape. That could have been a landscape, could have been a landscape with a dark sky, could have been the other way with a dark foreground. I eventually decided it needed to be vertical and was really a figure. And you've got to call these things something. So, there you have it. So, as with all of these, some of you, especially the artists here, might say, you should have gone further, you stopped too soon, or you didn't stop soon enough, and that would be perhaps valid. And you, if you were painting it, you would have done something different. In fact, if this would hang around long enough, I would do something different. As Karen will attest. But that's that. Then there's one called Passers By that you're not going to be able to see from here, but it's way up top in the corner. And it's the same kind of vein, and it's big strokes, nothing in mind. It's almost totally abstract. But I end up calling it Passers By because there are like three little figures sort of appear on the upper right. And there may be a figure in the foreground here. It's like some people are coming by something going on in the foreground. And there again, it's just a title. What I'm about is the colors, complements there. Orange and blue complements one another. Strong complements. And it seemed to be a rugged piece, sort of Franz Klein, de Kooning-esque. And once it got there, it's done. And one that's a little different from it called Green Frame. I'm not sure where that one is. Maybe it's, is that? It's upstairs? Okay. Maybe later you can see what I mean by that. But that one is complements again, green and red. And a lot of people say, don't ever do that. Green and red, can't do it. I mean bright green, bright red. But I just started out, I think, with a red ground, and then I painted a green frame around it. So it looks like it's a picture in a frame. And actually, I have to admit, when I did it, I was thinking of Howard Hodgkin. Howard Hodgkin, I think. He's a British painter. I did not know anything about him 20 years ago, but I went up to New York on a trip from Maryland and walked into this show, and I was just totally blown away by this stuff. And I actually went right next door and bought a big, thick book on the guy's work before he even saw the show. And what he did was he took big brushes and color right out of the can and painted these things and eventually called them something that had a subject name, but I don't know what he was doing when he painted, but he painted right out onto the frames. Wow. He had a canvas or a panel in a frame, sometimes a big fancy frame, and he painted right out onto the frame. So that, my picture is kind of like a tribute to him. There's one called Miasma that's behind Judith down there in the middle of that wall. That's the best example, perhaps, of the most, let's see, probably, I don't want to say the most innovative, but it's the most free association kind of thing, where I just painted it, put the colors down there, pretty much left them alone, and then that was sort of it. And I felt, that's it. There's no sense filling on that at all. And so that was a quick one, very quickly done, and very few have them like that. Then there's one called The Odd Couple that's behind Beverly over here. And those of you from Belfast might know who I might have been thinking of, but I wasn't thinking of anybody initially. If anybody, I was thinking of Harold and the way he puts colors together and the way he, lets you appreciate the interaction of the colors. And but like Harold in a way, there are these figures that showed up. And there is this couple in Belfast that wanders the streets. They don't look like that. They don't look like that, but they are different, one from the other. One's very small, one's very tall. And so I really have to admit, I titled it at least, thinking of these two. Then one of my very favorites is Striped Shirt. The second from the last down here, you can see it later, but it's this crazy looking little character. Looks like a wounded person. Wounded in spirit and wounded physically. I didn't start out to paint that person, but I had what's in the face, all that texture and all that, the whole surface was like that. Then I started covering up part of it, saying I don't want this and I don't want that, and I kept going. And then a little face appeared, and it was a face with hair, and it probably was a woman. And I thought, no, I don't like that hair, so I got rid of the hair, and it was like a face of a man, with less hair. And then I kept painting that, and eventually the hair went away. And I kept painting, I eventually covered all that busy stuff up with the green, and left this little character, and put some stripes on, which gives the title, Striped Shirt. And I even painted out the neck, thinking, I don't like the neck, I don't need that neck. So there's this little funny character with like almost no neck. And it's one of my favorites because I like the way it looks aesthetically, shapes and colors and pieces of paint. But it's also this psychological, kind of funny little guy, and just total surprise to me. And so I think that one also is probably, I like it because I like, say, the work of Alan McGee, a well-named painter who has these strange things, often wounded-looking characters. One called Democracy that's black and white. It's just graphite, just pencil. Very much sort of shades, influences of de Kooning and maybe Picasso. And it's a group of characters, figures kind of doing something, but not maybe people that you know or can identify as normal human beings, but people in some kind of setting. And I call it democracy because I'm thinking about politics a lot and whether our democracy is doing well or not. And so it's just a title. But what I'm interested in is the shapes and the values. And I love drawing on the Yupo with pencil because it's like slides across it like silk. It's terrific. And one final one is down here behind her on the wall, and you might need to really take a look at that one later. But that one is called 20 Thumbnails. And the reason I call attention to it is that I took my frog tape and made a grid of tape. Then I painted one big painting, abstract. If you look at it, you can see that it's a big painting. But then I pulled the tape off with the idea that I would have 20 little paintings. And then I tweaked every one of those little paintings. And so there were little studies for another painting. In fact, I think I could have a whole show on each one of this painting. It would be terrific. If you look at it, you'll see there are Andrew Wyeth barn interiors in there. There's Franz Klein, the abstract expressionist. Maybe even Rembrandt and some of the dark looking shades in there.
Not bad.
Not bad. In that one, I feel like I have 21 paintings, the big painting and 20 little ones. And I thought it looked very, very smart. Just, to me visually, it's exciting from afar. And each one of those little panels is exciting up front. I'm not close. But I will probably never paint the big pieces because that's work. That's not fun. That's not creative. That's it. So thank you very much for coming.